Welcome back, Sovereign Sister, to the Sovereign Sister Movement podcast. And I'm going to start this episode by sharing a truth with you that is probably going to shock you, but it's okay because you're ready for this truth. One of the things that you really need to understand on the generational healing journey is that your immune system, which protects you from illness, both physical and spiritual, it's not broken. Even with the rise of autoimmune disease and all these different illnesses, which all are correlated to generational trauma patterns, it's still not broken. Your immune system is actually just responding, and it's responding to these generational trauma patterns that have been passed down from each generation to the next generation in your family line. I'm talking about abandonment, abuse, raised by a mother who was depressed, a father who was depressed or was absent or abusive. In fact, every belief that your family has held about safety, about worth, about love is actually recorded in your cells. And nowhere does that record show up faster than in your immune system, especially when those beliefs were shaped by trauma. And I have to remind you that 95% of trauma is generational. What you went through, somebody in your lineage has gone through it too. But what if everything that you've been told about your immune system is actually wrong? What if it isn't fighting for you or even against you, but it's actually trying to heal you? For women, this often shows up long before the body even gets sick. It begins as chronic tension, that kind that you just cannot like sleep away, stretch away, or do all these other things to get rid of. It's that racing mind that won't rest even when life finally slows down. You're on vacation, looking at the beach. You would think you'd be relaxed. Why are you still worried? Why are there all those thoughts that don't allow you to be present? It's the gut that tightens when you're around your family. It's the skin that flares up after emotional conflict. It's the exhaustion that feels deeper than sleep can ever fix. It's autoimmune flare ups after a heartbreak, thyroid imbalance after betrayal, inflammation that mirrors the anger your lineage was never allowed to express. Now, from a biological lens, that's your immune system simply replaying old stress programming, trying to complete cycles of grief, of trauma that your mother and your grandmother and your great grandmother never got to finish. When we look at this from a trauma lens, this is like loyalty, where the body's like carrying the emotional labor of your entire bloodline. It's done unconsciously, but we stay loyal to those programs. And from a spiritual lens, my goodness, it's the body's quiet attempt to return you to truth, to teach you what safety, what worth, and what love actually feel like. I'm Veronica Barragan, trauma-informed Kundalini yoga therapist. And in this series on the Sovereign Sister Movement podcast on the systems of the body and generational healing, we've walked through several systems of your body and how it relates to generational trauma and how to end the cycle. We looked at the subtle body, the musculoskeletal system, the circulatory system, and even the respiratory system. So if you missed those podcast episodes, make sure you check those out because they are all connected, and I'll make sure to link them below you here in the description. Today, we're going to move into one of the most misunderstood systems, the immune system, the body's intelligence for repair, for boundaries, for belonging. And this episode matters so much because most women think that getting sick means that the body failed, that something has gone wrong. And when you look now at the latest science, which what is science? It's just the demystification of the spiritual. Science and spirituality will soon merge as one, with spirituality being the truth. But from a scientific perspective, where there's been trauma research, it is showing the opposite, that what we call sickness is actually often the body just simply finishing a stress cycle that perhaps started not with you, but with your ancestors, and that has been kept open for years and years and years. When we think about like autoimmune conditions or things like chronic inflammation or burnout, oh my gosh, that's becoming so common nowadays for women, high overachieving women who are going at it full speed. I was there, believe me, very, very toxic masculine energy where I got to this point where it didn't matter how many energy drinks I drank. My nervous system collapsed. My brain could no longer handle the excess adrenaline and cortisol that was moving through my body because I was living under chronic stress. And we're seeing high achieving women all of a sudden one day completely collapse, having to shut down their businesses or being impacted very much in their relationships due to this burnout. All of these things that I mentioned, they're not weakness and they're not a failure. They're simply repair signals that never got permission to complete. Now, when we look at this from a Kundalini Yoga therapy perspective, the immune system mirrors our arc line, which is one of the energetic bodies. If you go check out my podcast episode on the subtle anatomy of your body, I share with you why you're not just a physical body. There's 10 energetic layers. Everything in this world is energy. Everything. And then there's 10 layers of that make up your entire being. The soul body, three aspects of the mind, neutral, negative, and positive. We have the aura, the physical body, we have the subtle body, and we have also what is known as the arc line. Now, the arc line, I want you to think of it as like an energetic boundary that decides what to allow in and what to clear out. And we're going to talk about the arc line a little bit later in the podcast episode because I'm actually going to be sharing with you a mantra, a sound frequency, a Kundalini Yoga sound frequency that is going to help you in the immune system, especially if it's been impacted by patterns of generational trauma directly correlated to the father wound. We're going to talk about the father wound today as well. So, from a Kundalini Yoga therapy perspective, the arc line is this energetic boundary that decides what to allow in, what to clear out, right? Sort of like the lymph system that does that without a pump. And when we look at this from like a spiritual perspective, when I look at it from A Course in Miracles, Christ consciousness, Jeshua, Jesus perspective, sickness is never a punishment. It's actually a defense against the truth. And we're going to go deep into that today. This is like a moment, a sickness, illness, where we forget we are one with God and the body starts trying to defend an illusion of separation. And so today we're connecting science, spirit, and lineage. How generational trauma, especially the father wound and what it is, teaches the body to live without protection or direction, and how that confusion shows up biologically as immune imbalance, not immune disorder, not your immune system is broken, it's just imbalance. It's trying to protect you. You'll learn in this episode the real science of the immune system and how we have even been fooled on purpose about germs and how things are contagious. You're also going to learn the Kundalini tools that actually end the pattern of the father wound and actually end the pattern of an immune system that is constantly under high alert. You're also going to learn the Christ consciousness reframe that restores trust in the body's intelligence and that'll help you shift your perception about illness, especially if you yourself are working through an illness. So stay until the end though, because we're going to close out with this healing mantra that is known as the Rama Dasa mantra in Kundalini Yoga. This is a frequency that really synchronizes the sun, the moon, and the earth with the infinite to rebuild your body's ability to heal itself and others. A mantra that I've used myself, especially post operation. I actually had an operation in April, nothing serious, nothing of illness. I simply was removing my breast implants, as you all know from my podcast episode. If you want to go find out what that journey is about, the video or the podcast is here also on my YouTube channel. But this is a mantra that I use to heal my cells and to not use painkillers or any other meds that were gonna further like slow down my healing process after that. And it's also a mantra that I've shared with my mom, that I've shared with so many of my clients, that is so easy to integrate and practice and that has such a huge impact. So stay until the end as I share that with you as well. Now, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at first understanding what the immune system is. And I'm going to explain this to you in a way that even like a second grader, fifth grader could understand it, because you don't have to like go be a doctor or a neuroscientist or study for a long time to understand who you are. It's so important to know who you are and how your systems work, because if there is ever an imbalance, you can always bring the solution, right? So this week, as we talk about the immune system, let's kind of envision the immune system as the body's administration for repair. Your immune, the simplest way or the simplest truth to understand about your immune system is that your immune system is not a defense army that's always fighting and protecting. It's not supposed to be doing that. But if you have experienced patterns of generational trauma, like I mentioned at the beginning, your nervous system stays in fight and flight. Cortisol, adrenaline being secreted from the brain nervous system, right? And so the nervous system or the immune system stays like a defense army that has to protect you. That's when it's out of balance. But the immune system is not supposed to do that continuously. The immune system is more like an administrative network that monitors and repairs and restores balance all day, 24 hours a day. We new cells are born every single day. So I want you to think of your immune system kind of like as a neighborhood that never sleeps. So think about your neighborhood, right? You live in a house or an apartment or wherever you live, and there's other houses, other people. It's a neighborhood, right? But it never sleeps. Every street, every house, and neighbor, they have a specific job to keep basically the community clean and safe and peaceful. And when everyone in the neighborhood does their part, then the neighborhood stays calm, right? But when fear moves in, generational trauma patterns, abuse, abandonment, and it doesn't have to be one big event. There's post-traumatic stress, which is an event, a traumatic event that occurred, but then there's complex post-traumatic stress, which is chronic, just a series of events. Like again, being raised by a mother who was depressed herself, who was an alcoholic, a dad that was an alcoholic, a dad that was abusive, a dad that did not have strength in his masculine energy because his dad never taught him how to protect and how to feel protected. We're going to go deeper into that. So that's like the thieves that move into the neighborhood to create chaos. So that's the fear. And that's when generational trauma or those patterns then tell the body that nothing is safe, that the neighbors basically start panicking. They're all locking each door, they're yelling across fences, right? That panic is what we experience also as inflammation, as allergies, or exhaustion, pretty much. So, in order to understand that, the immune system, let's meet all of the neighbors so you can have a better idea of how this all works. So, in this neighborhood, there's a lot of neighbors. And the first part of the nervous system is what is known as the physical barriers. So the physical barriers include like your skin, your saliva, tears, mucus, stomach acid, all of these, think of them as like the fences of the house or like the front doors. And they decide who gets to come in and who doesn't. But when trauma has trained the body to see everything as a threat because your nervous system basically got stuck in fight and flight, what does that mean? Fight and flight is powerful. It's supposed to work so that if there's a dangerous thing happening, like a trauma experience or a lion chasing you, you can run away, right? But what happens when your nervous system gets stuck in that? because the trauma was never released from your body. So a zebra, I always give this example, if he gets chased by the lion and he gets away, he goes away and he shakes his body vigorously to release the traumatic experience from his body because it leaves chemical residue, the adrenaline and the cortisol, right? But if we don't do that, if there's no movement, I'm not just talking about going to the gym. I'm talking about meditation to change the nervous system and the brain. Then what happens is that we're going to see everything as a threat because these memories and these experiences get stuck in the body, in the organs, right? So then when the trauma has trained the body to see everything as a threat, like there's thieves everywhere, the world is not safe, those doors can slam shut. And then if the doors slam shut, which are these physical barriers in the immune system, then they show up as allergies, as skin reactions, as chronic tension. Why? Because there's no movement. Emotions are energy in motion. And if you've been through a traumatic experience or if you grew up with a lot of grief, sadness, anger, and it was consistent and it was chronic, then your body literally starts to shut down. These physical barriers, they start to shut down because they think that they're constantly protecting you. They don't know that the event happened 20 years ago. Your brain also does not know the difference between an experience and a perceived experience. So if you're constantly reverting back to the past, your body doesn't know that it's not 20 years ago. Your body thinks it's happening right now, which is why we need to be very careful also what we consume on TV and the things that we consume on social media and things of that nature. So that's the physical barriers. Now, the second part of the neighborhood is the lymphatic vessels and fluid. So the lymphatic vessels and the fluid, we talked a little bit about the lymph system in last week's episode with grief, very important. But I want you to think of the actual lymphatic vessels and the fluid as like the streets and the water pipes of the neighborhood. So they carry a lot of information, right? And supplies. That's the immune cells, the nutrients, but also the waste. And they're making sure that every house gets what it needs to stay balanced, right? And then from there, there's the lymph nodes. And these are like the neighborhood watch stations. And they collect what's floating through the streets. And then they decide, oh my God, is this safe? Is this trouble? Is this a toxin? Is this good for me? But when they're swollen, which is very common for women when they're under chronic stress, it does not mean that the system is failing. It means that the watch team is basically working overtime to keep you safe. You're not broken because your lymph nodes are swollen. It's just that you need movement, you need flow of prana moving through your body to heal so that the basically the neighborhood watch stations can get a break. And then we have what is known as the immune cells. And the immune cells are the neighbors and the helpers, the ones that sweep, that repair, and they remember who they are, really. They're the ones that respond when something feels off, all of your immune cells. And they take orders from your nervous system, which is why, first, in order to heal grief, we have to work through the lungs and the lymph. And then in order to actually heal the nervous system, we have to deal with the lungs and the lymph first because that'll build enough vitality so that your nervous system has enough prana to feel safe to heal. That's why the healing energy is not all love and light. Healing journey is not all love and light. It's there's a lot of things you don't know what you don't know. And you have to come to a point of awareness to change what it is you become aware of. You can't change what you're not aware of. And the reason why we're not aware of how much these trauma patterns have impacted us is because we don't even have enough prana. We have been living in survival. There's not enough energy for us to even face these things. So your nervous system basically takes orders. And if you live in constant stress, these neighbors that are your immune cells, they're going to stay in high alert. And they're also going to be receiving a lot of cortisol and adrenaline because your thoughts, like we've talked about, produce neuropeptides. It's a chemical. So if you're at peace versus in anger, they produce a chemical that then travels right into the cells. But remember what I said, chanting mantra, frequency travels faster to the cell than even you having all these negative thoughts. And that's why I'm sharing with you today a mantra that's going to help you chant it so that it's going to help your immune system. And it's going to help healing in general. Then another big part of the immune system is also the bone marrow. The bone marrow is like the power plant in the neighborhood, and it keeps all the lights on and it produces new immune cells every single day. It doesn't matter how old you are. And in fact, a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm 50 or I'm 60 or I'm 70 and these are my ways and how am I going to change my brain?" You could be 100 years old and through Kundalini yoga meditation, your brain, if you're a consistent practitioner, your brain can look like a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. It doesn't matter what trauma you've been through. So the bone marrow is the power plant that keeps the lights on in the neighborhood. And it produces brand new immune cells every day. But we have to understand that chronic stress, which is what happens with trauma, it dims its energy, meaning fewer fresh workers to handle the repair and recovery. So all the workers in the power plant that keep the lights on, they're tired, they're fatigued, they're not present, they're eating bad foods, right? They're just not, they can't handle the overwhelm of the repair and recovery process. And then as also part of our immune system, we have what is known as the thymus gland. Now, the thymus gland, think of it as like the school, right in the center of the town. Power plant, neighbors, all these different components, right? And then you got the thymus gland, which is this beautiful school where new immune cells learn what truly belongs to you and what doesn't. And when this school is like strong, meaning the children are eating great foods, they're getting good sleep, and there's no trauma impacting it, the immune system recognizes your own tissues as home, so you feel safe in your body. But when it's weakened by chronic stress, by trauma, which creates a lot of self-doubt and a lot of self-rejection, all the students are going to get confused. And sometimes they're going to attack their own neighborhood. And that's what medicine then calls autoimmune, and what trauma calls self-protection gone sideways. So autoimmune diseases are actually self-protection gone sideways. And so the last part of your immune system is what is known as the spleen. And the spleen is like the recycling center of the entire neighborhood. And it's also an emergency storage unit. And it filters these old blood cells and it stores extras in there as well. And it makes sure that the resources are actually available when life does get hard, when life does get stressful. Stress is not bad. It's staying under chronic stress because you didn't release the memories from the body, because you didn't have the movement to release the contraction and expansion of grief that is very common in generational trauma. So basically, every part of this neighborhood, it listens to the nervous system's announcements, and the nervous system is what gets pre-wired in the womb by our mother and our father, because our father, the brain, the neurons of the brain of our father are already connecting to our neurons in our brain, even in the womb. They're already mirroring. So imagine if father is not there or father is abusive. That's what we're going to talk about next. So basically, every part of your neighborhood, your immune system, it listens to the nervous system. And when the announcement says all clear, that's when the town repairs and rests, right? There's no thieves. But when it says we're under threat, World War III, right? There's thieves, there's violence, there's civil unrest. Everyone runs outside with alarms, right? And if that alarm never turns off, which is very common for those that have experienced generational trauma for their entire life, like in families that have lived generation after generation under survival patterns, not enough food, abuse, neglect, abandonment, tragic losses, grief because of deaths in the family. It's a lot, right? Then what happens is that the immune system also forgets how to relax. And so the real question is not, and this is what everyone asks, how do I boost my immune system? That's not the real question. The real question is, how do I remind my neighborhood that it's safe to rest again? How do I remind my neighborhood that it's actually safe to rest again? That's the real question. And that's where trauma, especially the father wound, enters the story. Every part listens to your nervous system. Relaxed, nervous system regulated, repair genes on, inflammation off. If you're tense because of chronic stress and trauma, your cortisol goes up, adrenaline goes up, your confusion goes up, the fogginess in the brain goes up, right? So again, how do I help my immune system remember safety, right? Not how do I boost my immune system? And that's what we're going to talk about next, especially as it relates to the father wound. The father wound being the story which we're going to talk about. But before we do that, I want to share with you something very important about the immune system that I found out that really showcased how much our sovereignty is taken from us, and we're programmed through these industries in order to keep us sick so that they can continue to make money. And one of the things about the immune system that is said in disease in general, and think about this pandemic that just happened, right? Is that like disease is contagious. And I want to pause here and bring in something really important that I believe most of us are not even ever taught, and it's on purpose. We've been told for generations that germs make us sick. So if you have a weak immune system, then someone else's germs are gonna make you sick. And that illness comes from something outside of us. That's what they keep telling us, right? And believe it or not, that idea came from a French, he was like an influencer. He wasn't even a doctor. He wasn't even like a scientist. I think he had some chemistry background, but not like really educated in this field. So this is why I'm like, this was propaganda that they were just trying to spread. So basically, this guy's name, this French guy, his name was Louis Pasteur. And he's the one who created the germ theory. And he taught that if you basically get exposed to a germ or you get exposed to someone else who's sick, that you're gonna get sick. And that was the end of the story, right? But here's what most people don't know. And even Pasteur changed his mind before he died. But no one knows about this because it doesn't benefit the moneymakers, right? But Pasteur admitted on his deathbed that germs are nothing, that terrain is everything. So, what does this mean? The germ is nothing, the terrain is everything. What does this mean? That the germ is the bacteria or virus, right? That's the what we think causes the illness. But the terrain is the condition of your body, your stress, your breath, your rest, your boundaries, your emotions, your entire environment. So when the terrain is strong, calm, and balanced, the germs come and go, and the body repairs itself. But when the terrain is full of chaos, stress hormones, inflammation, fear, and unprocessed grief, the body cannot tell what is safe. And that's when confusion begins, like we were talking about in the neighborhood, right? That's when the immune system stops repairing, which is its job, and it starts defending. So when we look at the immune system through the lens of generational trauma, we can see that all illnesses yeah, all illnesses are not about catching something. It's about carrying something. It's not an invasion, it's a memory. For example, when your father lived through a lot of fear, maybe he was a veteran of the war, that's one of the hardest hit father line um, segments. Because especially, I mean, I have clients in my community who their fathers were in the Vietnam War. And there was so much trauma in those that go to war because there's this type of trauma. There's a name for it, and I can't think of it right now, but basically when you force someone to do something that goes against their own values, like unaliving innocent people at war, that is the one of the worst types of trauma for your brain and nervous system. And that's why you see a lot of war veterans come back and with deep depression, have such a high rate of unaliving. So think about it. If they have such high rates of trauma because of war, Then they come back home, they get married, they have babies, and that's how they raise those babies. So when your father lived through a lot of fear, anger, resentment because of war, because of his own trauma, because of the emotional neglect that he went through, his dad also didn't protect him because he couldn't. Then your terrain learned to stay on high alert. So it's not germs that break us down. It's in fact like if you go to let's say you travel to a new country. I love to travel, so I go everywhere. And if you, let's say that there's new viruses and new germs in new countries, right? So let's say that you got sick with something you ate or whatever. That's not a bad thing. That means now your body is ready to take on that environment. Your body had to get sick through that virus so that it can basically surrender to this new environment. But most people freak out. And if they freak out because they got sick in another country, there's more fear, more fear, more fear, more fear. And then what we've been told that it makes us sick, this outer. And then what happens is that the immune system starts thinking it needs to defend itself instead of protecting or doing what it needs to do because the germs don't break us down. And this is, think about it, even in your household. I bet you it's happened where you've gotten sick and it's happened here in our house where I live, my two sons and my husband, right? So there's times when my husband got sick and then I remember it was recently it was actually right after my operation. So there was already a lot of stress on me. So it had nothing to do with my immune system was weak. It was just that there was a lot of stress. My body was trying to repair itself. My husband got sick with the flu, and then I got sick with the flu afterwards. It's not because he gave it to me, it's because my terrain was not strong. My son didn't get sick. My other one got a little bit sick, but there was the youngest one didn't get sick at all. His terrain was solid. And think about even the pandemic. There were a lot of households where some people got COVID and some people didn't. Why? Because it's not the germs, it's the terrain. The germs do not break you down or your nervous system. It's the constant stress signals that never turn off. That's why we get sick easier because we've been living under chronic stress. If you change the terrain, then the germs can't even affect you, or they'll affect you in a way where, again, your body just acclimates to them. That's a natural process. So the body is not fighting the world. The world isn't all a one big battle. The body is fighting for peace within the world and learning how to feel safe. And that's again connected to the father wound, which we're going to talk about next. And that's why again, two people can be exposed to the same germ and only one gets sick. And that's why also very few diseases are passed generationally. What is passed generationally, according to epigenetics, the science of how this happens, is our stress response, our coping mechanism, our emotional states of being, sadness, anger, resentment, grief. Those things do get passed down, which then, of course, impact the way our immune system works. So the difference is not luck. Oh, he's lucky he didn't get sick and I did. It's just the state of the terrain. When your nervous system is regulated through meditation, when you've learned to breathe above your belly button through meditation, your boundaries are clear. Your immune system knows how to respond with intelligence, repair, not defend, repair intelligence so that it's not panicking. So you don't have to control the outside world or the germs or the viruses to have a strong immune system. You just have to tend to your inner terrain because your terrain is your temple, and safety is actually the soil where repair begins. So I welcome you to feel free to do your own research on this dude who basically did this to us. His name, again, Louis Pasteur. I'll link his name below in the description. And let me know what you find out too, because they do a great job also of scrubbing the internet. So a lot of these things is you have to kind of really do some research. But I'd love to know if you've heard of him or if you actually did some research, what are the things that you find out? And let us know in the comments or let us know when we go live on TikTok Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So now that we understand a little bit more about the immune system and the lies we've been told about it, and we see it as the neighborhood that it is, let's talk about what actually happens inside the body when stress never gets to end. And this is what generational trauma is. So basically, your nervous system has two main settings, as we talked about before: activation and repair. Science basically calls them the sympathetic and the parasympathetic branches of your nervous system. And one gets you ready to act, fight and flight, like I said. The other restores what was spent, right? It's a repair system. So in a balanced life, these systems basically dance with each other, right? You face a challenge because this is not about never facing a challenge. Life is beautiful and you grow through the things when the curriculum shows up as a challenge because you're forced to respond differently. That's growth, right? So when you face a challenge, but instead of reacting to it like your ancestors have, or like you've always had as well, if you instead breathe through it because you've been meditating and your nervous system is much more regulated, if you simply become aware of it and not identify with it, you basically are allowing to rest and recover, and you're allowing the immune system to clear the residue. But if you've been under patterns of generational trauma, when survival basically becomes the family culture, this dance that we're talking about, it turns into like this constant alarm in the neighborhood. Imagine living in a neighborhood where there's an alarm that's going off the entire time. Like that is overwhelming, right? And the way what that how science actually describes that is that it is the HPA axis. It's the communication line between your brain, your adrenals, and your immune cells, the ones that we talked about here today. They stay switched on, basically. That's the HPA axis. So that means cortisol, adrenaline, all these inflammatory messengers, they circulate long after the danger is over. Woo, way over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? Even next generation. So at first, this feels like energy. It feels like productivity. It feels like you're alert, right? But over time, it just becomes cellular confusion where the immune system forgets the difference between what's a threat and what's a memory. And that's because, again, the brain does not know the difference between a perceived trauma versus one that you actually experience, right? And that's why trauma research shows way higher rates of autoimmune conditions, chronic fatigue, thyroid disorders, fibromyalgia. It's so common in women that have early or generational stress, trauma. And it's not a weakness. It's the biology of overprotection. Your immune system just thinks it constantly needs to defend you. So when your lineage has lived through the war, through colonization, even migration and poverty, addiction, abuse, physical, mental, sexual abuse, your body then inherits that vigilance, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? And that's what epigenetic studies actually show, is they show that trauma marks DNA like kind of like a sticky note on your DNA. And it's on that sticky note, it says, stay alert, don't relax. Safety is unpredictable. When is the other shoe gonna drop? Because that's what you did as a child. You were hyper vigilant. When is the next time my parents are gonna fight? When is the next time I'm not gonna have enough to eat? When is the next time I'm gonna get bullied? When is the next time my mom is going to hit me? When is the next time my dad is going to ground me? When is the next time I'm going to see my dad angry for no reason? So that becomes basically an instruction that gets passed down from generation to generation until it's rewritten at the level of the nervous system and at the level of the brain. So illness is not just random bad luck, as you can see. It's basically the body obeying this old instruction to survive. The body is like, I'm trying to figure this out. And this is what we've always done, right? But there's a lot of good news here because instructions can absolutely be changed. It doesn't matter how old you are. This has been tested as well. It doesn't matter what trauma you've experienced, we can change those instructions. And here's where the father wound becomes key. Last month, we talked a lot about restoring the mother line, right? But the father wound, it's heavy because the father wound is directly correlated with feeling safe in our physical bodies. The mother is about spiritual protection and safety in the spiritual realm, protected, right? In the physical, the father's role is to be the protector in the physical realm, right? So when we don't have a father that's present, we have a father who's gone through his own trauma. My dad, best dad in the world, best grandpa in the world, but he had his own trauma too. And his own trauma was a lot of grief from my grandmother on my dad's side of the family. I didn't get to really spend a lot of time with her because she transitioned when I was only like, I was young. I was like 6 or 7, but I still remember her because we would always go to her house for Sunday breakfast. And all of my dad's brothers and sisters would get together and we would go there. And I know that I lived with her when I was younger, but I really don't remember that too much. But my grandmother actually died, or she died from a heart attack. And it was a heart attack has something to do with health, like physical, like what you're eating, because even athletes die of a heart attack has to do with grief. And she had a lot of grief that she was going through. But my dad was also, he had a lot of trauma because, well, growing up, his father was like, my grandfather was like the most charismatic, like I love that man. I could never talk bad about him, but he was a wild man, you know. He was unfaithful to my grandma a lot, which caused her a lot of grief. And he also was very hard on my dad, not as much as the other brothers, because my dad was the youngest, but still he was he was very like strict. And so my dad, when my grandmother transitioned, he was coming from the United States to Mexico to go see her for the last time because they told him he was sick and he was with his brothers and sister. And the plane almost crashed. Literally, they were even on the news. They got sent back to LAX at that point time and they were even interviewed because the plane almost crashed. And because of that, by the time they got on the next plane, by the time they got to his mom transitioned and I was very little, and that affected my dad in a very, very big way with a lot of grief that he was holding. But one of the things is like he always wanted to protect his mom as a child from dad, right? Grandpa, again, my grandpa was the nicest human being to me. But he was to my dad a completely different story. And I was talking to our community, the grandparents kind of feel like with their grandkids, they got like a second chance to do things right that they didn't do right with their kids. Some grandparents, right? Not all of them. And my grandparents were like that, especially my dad's side. My grandpa, he was like so charismatic. Everybody knew him. Everybody wanted to talk to him. He was like the best, right? So it's hard to like see him as a as a bad grandfather, as a bad father to my dad. And it's not about blaming or judging. It's just that this was the reality and this is what they grew up with. And that's why my dad struggled with like alcoholism and things of that nature. But with me, he was always like very like loving. He was very much in his divine feminine as well. And a lot of the work that I had to do around my father line restoration was more like the fear of like attachment, like the fear of losing my father or not being able to fully be there for him because I just have so much gratitude towards him. And I'm not saying this for those of you that are going through situations where your father was not present, where your father was abusive. And it's actually very common. It's very common for all types of abuse from a father, believe it or not. And it was weird because even when I was growing up as a little girl, I would gravitate a lot of the friends that would come to me, they all had like big issues with their dad. Big issues. Like the dad was like horrifically abusive. And one of my friends' situation, in case I was so little, I was like a fifth grader, and she was telling me all her stories about how her dad was with her, and it was horrific. And it was almost like a foreshadowing of like me and what I was going to be doing as work later, because now I feel so empowered when I teach the Fatherline series inside of my community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, because it was something that I was being trained for since I was a little girl. And so when the father, whether he was present but depressed or absent, completely left the family or unsafe because he was abusive, that is an imprint that it's that imprints the template for direction and protection in the nervous system. So when your father was moving through his own trauma, you lost the feeling of feeling protected in the physical world, and you also lost the feeling of direction, the compass. And two things can happen. You can become very like Disney princess syndrome, where you're waiting for someone to come save you, or you can move into really toxic masculinity, which is like major hustle, not knowing your worth, right? Like, you don't know anything about alignment. You basically are just pushing, 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 because that's what the masculine, what was mirrored to you from your father. So we have to think about that this is a template. Whether the father was present, absent, or unsafe, the father imprints the template for direction and protection in the nervous system. And when the template collapses, the body loses its internal sense of I've got you. And that's why a lot of women don't feel safe in their bodies. They feel anxious, depressed. They feel like this whole world is dangerous. Because without it, especially your immune system, it's gonna keep scanning for danger. It's gonna keep trying to defend you. And just like a child waiting for someone to come home, that person may never come home, right? And so in women, this collapse of the template often looks like self-attack, like overworking, overgiving, or inflammation that burns energy from the inside out. And biologically, it's actually the same pattern. The immune system attacking its own tissues because it does not feel protected. Now, spiritually, it's the daughter carrying the father's unfinished trauma, unfinished fear, unfinished anger, unfinished resentment for his father not protecting him. And so you don't need to fix that by fighting your body. You repair it by you restoring your direction, your compass, by teaching your system, your immune system, through your nervous system, that leadership and safety and action and alignment can coexist inside of you. And that's exactly the work of Kundalini Yoga therapy. And so now that we have a better understanding of the science of how stress, epigenetics, and the father wound keep the immune system in confusion in the neighborhood, I want to explore now how actually Kundalini Yoga therapy gives the body a new signal, a new command, the command that we are actually safe enough to repair. We don't have to keep running away from ourselves. And that's where we have to talk about the father wound and the collapsed inner masculine. How does this show up in your life? Because every lineage carries a story about the masculine. In some families, the father was physically there, but emotionally absent, right? In others, he was very unpredictable, loving one moment, explosive the next, right? In some families, he was abusive, physically, sexually sometimes, emotionally. And for many women, he just wasn't there at all. Literally, he walked out in their lives. Now, from a trauma science lens, the father is your imprint of direction, of protection in the physical, of your trust in authority. And so when that energy is like consistent, right? A child's nervous system is going to develop a sense of safety. I feel safe. There's order. I can rest. But when that energy is unstable, the nervous system basically stays on guard. No one's steering the ship. I have to control everything. And that constant vigilance is insane because it floods the body with the cortisol and adrenaline we were talking about. So because your immune system and your body's always listening, that your immune system then translates that lack of safety as a chronic signal to defend. So at first it's going to try to protect like we talked about, but eventually it's just going to start to attack. And in biology, that's what we call autoimmune. But trauma language, we call it auto defense, the body defending itself from the memory of unpredictability. Now, add generations. If your grandmother's husband went to war, if your mother grew up walking on eggshells around her father's moods, your own body learned before birth to basically expect that tension. And that expectation sits inside of the immune system's decision-making process because it keeps scanning the environment like a radar, excuse me, asking, hey, is it safe yet? Can I go ahead and rest? Can we start the repair process here? And because rest never feels earned, especially with the father wound, masculine toxicity is all about massive amounts of action until you burn out and you no longer can move forward. Wealth is health, I'm telling you. So because rest never feels earned, the repair phase basically stays incomplete. So your ancestors never got to that repair phase. So what if your autoimmune systems, your fatigue, your inflammation, they're not your body betraying you. It's your father line crying out for direction, for boundaries, for peace, for protection. Men need protection from their fathers too. In Kundalini Yoga therapy, we call that loss of direction a collapse of that inner masculine, a collapse of your Saibon, your truth, Satnam, who you really are. Every woman carries both polarities, and every male does too. The nurturing current of the feminine, which is creative, which is intuitive, and then there's the directional current of the masculine, which is logical, more from the mind, more about alignment, not action. That's toxic masculinity. It's alignment. When you align, the action comes naturally, right? So when the outer father wound damages trust and protection, the inner masculine inside of you basically loses its post. So without inner leadership, because it wasn't mirrored to you by your father, the body then compensates through control, tight muscles, shallow breath, inflammatory chemistry, pretty much. And science confirms this because studies on chronic stress actually show decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex part of your brain. That's the part of the brain responsible for decision, focus, emotional regulation, and direction. Direction. And increased activity also in what is known as the amygdala. It's like a little almond-shaped part of your brain. And this is your fear center. So the chronic stress, decreased activity in these areas of your brain, like, for example, the prefrontal cortex, the immune system then loses regulation because that's part of the emotional regulation process. It can't tell a real infection from an emotional memory. So healing the father wound is not about blame at all. Your emotions are valid. The first step of healing or restoring the father line is awareness that how you were raised or what you went through was not right. Awareness of honoring the emotions of whatever moves through you, grief, sadness, anger. We're not blaming. We're finally being seen. Because that's the hardest thing in the generational healing journey. A child that was never seen and an adult that then tries to talk to their family about what happened and then still is not seen. It's so infuriating, and it can absolutely change your immune system and your health in a very quick way. So we're not blaming. What we're doing is we're reactivating the part of us that says, now I lead my body. I choose safety through God, through a higher power. I choose clarity through God, through a higher power. My father could not do that for me because he didn't receive that, but I choose it. And when that inner masculine inside of you stands up again, because we rewire your brain and nervous system, the immune system is finally going to get very clear orders: what to release, what to keep, what to repair. It's not going to be in defense mode anymore. It's going to be in repair more. And this is why direction heals inflammation, why structure heals chaos, why consistency in your meditation heals confusion. When you create inner leadership, which I call restoring the inner temple, your biology follows. And we do this through meditations, through Kundalini meditations. So now that we understand how the father line affects the immune system's sense of safety and direction, let's move into Kundalini Yoga therapy and how that restores that leadership at the cellular level through meditation and through a very specific mantra that we chant in Kundalini Yoga, which is known as the Ra Ma Da Sa mantra. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about how the body remembers safety because you can't think your immune system into regulation. As much as you want to be a positive thinker, it can happen. The reason why you can't stay consistent positive thoughts is because your nervous system is so dysregulated and your brain is pre-wired for trauma. So you're not lazy, you're not worthless. It's just we need to change the nervous system. But you have to first understand that we can change it through somatics, which is meditation, through breathing, right? Through chanting. Because like I said, frequency arrives fastest to the cell than any chemical. And in Kundalini yoga therapy, we use chanting, we use breathing, we use meditation as the steering wheel of the nervous system. It's how you tell every cell whether you're in direction or in danger. Awareness, and then you steer the boat, right? Before meditation, you can't do that. You can't tell your cells that. And there's no compass, there's no direction because of the father line, right? And think about it, when your breath is shallow, what happens is that you can't breathe above the belly button typically. The breath gets trapped in the chest. Why? Because of trauma. You've been under chronic stress for such a long time, right? The brain then assumes the threat. It just believes it. And then the sympathetic part of your system, which is your gas pedal, it stays pressed down just like that. That means that adrenaline, cortisol, and inflammation is flooding the system. But when you change your breathing, and that happens through chanting mantra or breathing meditations in Kundalini, right? Then what happens is that expands the diaphragm. It activates the vagus nerve, one of the most important nerves as it relates to your nervous system. It's like your body's natural brake. Your heart rate changes, it slows down. Your digestion returns. Why? Because you're processing emotions. We had a whole podcast episode on the digestive system as well. So go check that one out too. And that's when the immune system then switches from defend to repair. And it's actually measurable science because it is scientifically proven that slower nasal breathing, and that's why we have different breathing techniques inside of Kundalini yoga, and they give you a different like result, right? But when nasal breathing increases, your vagal tone and your heart rate variability, which tells your body we are safe enough to heal, actually changes. Now, breath alone is very, very powerful, right? But in Kundalini yoga therapy, we combine breath with sound and with meditation. And it's the same thing. Chanting mantra is meditation. Breathing is meditation. It's just different forms, right? Sound creates vibration, and vibration is information. So when you chant, this is the science of energy, Kundalini yoga. These are frequencies that give you a specific chemical result in your body. So things like chanting, humming, we do a lot in Kundalini yoga, and we also do whistling because it impacts the vagus nerve a lot. When you do those things, you are stimulating cranial nerves in the face, in the throat, in the brain. In fact, chanting is so powerful. I chant every single day. And chanting, your tongue is touching the upper palate of your mouth. And the upper palate of your mouth, each section is actually lighting up and impacting a specific area of your brain. So when you're chanting, it's like you're harmonizing your body, mind, spirit into coherence, into alignment with God, versus what you were before, which was chaos, right? All of these emotions all over the place, immune system defending. So chanting, the tongue activating these areas of the top of the palate of the mouth, then impacting the brain to rewire it, impacting the nervous system to rewire it as well. So when you do this, you're stimulating all these cranial nerves in the face, in the throat, in the brain, in the vagus nerve, and this turns sound and frequency into medicine. It's like a mechanical and energetic message that says, hey, calm down. It's time to restore. It's time to actually repair. And the way I've seen it work for me too is that we all have negative thought patterns. I'm not good enough. There's never enough money. I'm, uh, I'm, I feel guilty. All these different things that all beliefs. I'm not worthy. All these things, right? With mantra, you become so aware of the thoughts that you're having that as you start to have these patterns of negative generational beliefs, what happened to me was that I would become aware of that belief, and then all of a sudden the mantra would start playing because mantra is like you're installing it into your cells, right? So I would start to have this belief about a worry or something. And then instead of going down the rabbit hole and losing myself and all the ways that it could go wrong, and which is what we do to self-sabotage when things are getting good for us, then all of a sudden instead my mantra came in. one mantra that I've chanted for more than 1,000 days, on more than 3 years, is long ekonkars. So it's ekonkar. So I'd be like having these experiences, and all of a sudden, instead of hearing those thoughts, all I could hear was like ekonkar. Like it was just like interceding. It was like stopping that negative thought right in its marks. And that's why vocal toning is so, so freaking powerful, because it's like the repair process of all these ways that challenges and stress come up in our life, right? Now, the other part about this that's very, very important, I actually want to show you a quick picture of this, because we talked about the energetics of the body, right? We're not just one body, we're 10 energetic bodies. And one of the things that's so fascinating about the immune system is the connection it has with the arc line. So in this picture here, you're going to see the arc line. Women have two arc lines. Men only have one. It's actually arc line from earlobe to earlobe. Everybody has that. But then women have one from nipple to nipple. And this is where we store all of our sexual experiences as well, which if you have an ex or things of that nature, you want to clear. The arc line actually connects us to the Akash, to the book of life. And this particular body from within us basically keeps record of all of these past lives and all these samskaras, all these different points of our experience as a soul. And now the arc line, though, is heavily connected to the actual immune system, because the arc line is what we call basically the halo of integrity and of truth. And it's also the electric magnetic field that mirrors the thymus gland's function. And just like the thymus trains immune cells to know the self from not the self, a clear arc line, there's specific Kundalini meditations and kriyas and mantras that we use. It helps you know truth from illusion. And that's very important in trauma healing. When the arc line is basically clear, you have boundaries that are clean. You're setting them from a place of love, not from a place of you needing to defend yourself, because you already know you are protected through God. And the way you know you're protected through God is by rewiring your nervous system and brain through meditation. So your immune system knows what belongs and what doesn't. So in Kundalini Yoga, we work on the arc line to strengthen the immune system. There's specific meditations, specific kriyas, because what we have to understand that is when it's congested, the arc line with guilt, with shame, with self-betrayal, with betrayal from others, with all these different things, the boundaries are going to blur, and you're going to set boundaries from a place of hate or a place of fear, which means they're only going to get broken over and over and over again, physically and energetically. So basically, you see that as inflammation, as fatigue, as some kind of crazy confusion, right? So one of the fastest ways to repair the immune system is actually to clear the arc line. And that's done again through mantra, meditation, through specific breathing techniques. And the mantra we're using in this series is the one that I mentioned, the Rama Da Sa Se So Hung. And with the hung part, you want to like bring your navel in to the back of your spine when you're saying that part. So I want to break down what it means and why it's so effective. So basically, Rama Dasa Sase Sohang, it incorporates all of the energies of the ethers, all of the energies that comprise who you are. Ra equals the sun, life force, action, vitality. It reawakens the masculine principle, direction, strength, leadership, right? Now there's Ma, which is the moon, reflection, intuition, nourishment. So that soothes the nervous system and it restores your feminine energy. Your dad had both feminine and masculine energy in him. One of them might have been completely off or imbalanced based on the trauma, but he had both. And so do you. And then there's Da, which is the earth, grounding, stability, belonging. It brings the body back online after chronic stress. And Sa, which means infinity, the source field that connects everything. And we repeat it to magnify expansion and also to release all of the identities we create. Because we create identities through trauma, but if you understand that you're a soul having this human experience and that you are infinite, then you release a lot of pain and suffering. And then there's se so hung. Se so hung. I am that. The reminder that healing doesn't come actually from outside of you. It comes from remembering your oneness with the infinite, with higher source, with God, however you see that. So together the mantra creates like a full circuit from cosmic energy down into the body and back into the infinite. So it aligns with the sun, the moon, the earth, and the spirit inside of you. And this is where science meets spirit here, because when you chant this mantra, the rhythmic pattern of your breath synchronizes with your heart rhythm. The coherence improves immune regulation, lower inflammatory markers, and it produces measurable increases in oxytocin and serotonin, the happy chemicals, the chemistry of connection, of feeling safe in our bodies, even if we grew up with a wounded father. Now, from a trauma perspective, that means that your body is actually learning in real time that safety and spirituality can actually coexist. You're literally like reparenting your nervous system and your brain through vibration. That's how the immune system becomes a repairing mechanism, not a defending mechanism. So you can practice it on your own together. I'm going to link a video here below where I share more on how to use the mantra. But I just want you to keep it in your heart. Ra, ma, da, sa, se, so, hung. And when you say the hung part, I want you to bring your navel in. And you can do this as a meditation with your eyes closed, open. You can sit on a chair. You can sit on the floor. There is a particular meditation that there's several actually that use this mantra where we use mudra, our hands in a specific position. But with this, you can even listen to it while you're falling asleep. While you're asleep, this is also a really good mantra to use if you want to send healing energy to someone else, or you want them to heal. And like I said, with your hands, you can just simply put a right over the left and just sit up straight and try to keep your eyes closed. If that feels too difficult for you, then guess what? Keep your eyes open. And you can start with 3 minutes to actually get you going. And then after the first couple of weeks, change it to 5 minutes and do it up to 11 minutes. Now practice it for 40 days consistently where you're chanting it. At the beginning, you might need to just listen to it to memorize it. But this is one of those that you're not learning anything, you're actually remembering. And I want you to notice the resonance of what happens when you chant this, because it's not about singing at all, it's about frequency. When we use these mantras, it's massaging the thymus gland that's behind your sternum. It's stimulating T cell production and it's signaling your immune system to repair instead of defend. So when you're practicing it regularly, the mantra does what trauma once interrupted. It closes the stress cycle once and for all. It teaches your body that energy can absolutely rise and it can even settle without collapse. So while science measures antibodies, isn't that what we usually hear? Spirit measures your alignment. That's true masculine energy. And both are actually happening at once. So you're not chanting to fix anything. You're chanting to remind it that it's already intelligent, to remind your body. You're not chanting to fix your body. You're not doing the healing work to fix anything. You're chanting to remind your body that it's already intelligent, because boy, is it intelligent. You have the right to vibrate at peace. You can get out of survival mode. You have the right to heal without earning it. Absolutely. You have the right to belong in your own body and to feel safe in your body. And so now that we've grounded in the science and the somatics, now I want to take you in to the next lens. And this is the one that can be very triggering for so many, especially if you're working through some kind of physical illness. I want to take you through the lens of A Course in Miracles, Christ consciousness, the teachings of Jesus Christ, of Jeshua, our brother. Because the deepest healing, it doesn't stop at biology. It happens when the mind remembers its purpose, when the body stops defending and it starts communicating love. So, from a science perspective, we know how healing happens. Now, from Jesus Christ, A Course in Miracles, spiritual psychotherapy perspective, we know why. So in the Course, Christ, Joshua, says that sickness is a defense against your truth. Sickness is a defense against the truth. Sickness is a defense against the truth. And that line, my God, it used to frustrate me until I understood what defense actually really means. Because a defense is not a punishment, it's protection built on confusion. That's what it is. So when the mind forgets that it is one with God, and why do we forget? Because of trauma, because religion told us that we're separate from God. It believes it has to defend and separate itself. Yes, you needed a father to protect you in the physical, but ultimately, even if you didn't have a father, there's always higher power, God, source. You should actually release attachment to trying to be protected by your father, because your father is not always going to be there. I mean, he's going to be there spiritually, right? But physically, he's not always going to be there. So this is a lesson in you then learning to trust God, right? Learning to surrender to God, because you know you're being defended and protected by God. And so because of that, the body is the mind's messenger. It becomes a stage where that defense literally plays out every day. And in biology, defense looks like inflammation, like we talked about. In the psyche, it looks like guilt, self-attack. And in the spirit, it looks like pretty much forgetting love. So when you get sick, your body is not betraying you, I promise you. It's showing you where you've started defending fear instead of extending love. I'm going to repeat that again. It's showing you where you started defending fear instead of extending love. It's unconscious, but you're doing it. In the Course, Jesus teaches us that the moment that you repurpose the body for love, for truly useful purposes, its health becomes guaranteed. So using your life for service, not when you're sick, because you need to take care of yourself when you're sick, but once you recover, once you repair. So it doesn't feel, you'll never feel any symptoms. It means that the body's meaning changes. How and what we give meaning to things is really the important part. So basically, it means the body's meaning changes to from a wall of defense to a bridge of communication. That's all it is. And there's this beautiful, beautiful a story that I love from A Course in Miracles, where there was this one gentleman who survived 6 years and the loss of his entire family through trauma, 6 years of just abuse. And he worked 16 hours a day helping others without fatigue, sickness, or bitterness. And when asked how he was able to do that, he said, I decided that for the rest of my life, I would love every person I came in contact with. Now, in order to be able to do that, first you have to fall in love with yourself, right? Because if you're coming from a place of I need to save someone or I need the world to see how cool and amazing I am, your immune system is going to speak up, right? But when we look at this from a physiological view, that level of love keeps cortisol low. The immune cells are balanced. They're doing their work, right? And then the neighborhood's running perfectly. You got a high-end neighborhood here because the heart rhythms are coherent. Everything's functioning. Now, from a spiritual view, that level of love erases the need for defense. He lived what the Course means when it says you need do nothing now to make it well, for sickness has become impossible. I mean, think about how that applies to the immune system. When you see the body as separate and fragile, and the immune system basically is going to stay in fight mode, because that's how you see the body, weak, right? It's going to be defending the illusion of separation from God and isolation. But that's what Kundalini Yoga and yoga is all about, oneness, unity, right? Coming into one. When you remember oneness through your practice, through chanting Ramadasa, when you remember oneness, that your cells, your ancestors, that God and you are not divided, And that's when we pre-wire our nervous system and our brain. Then the immune system relaxes into function and it repairs without resistance, which is pretty fabulous. And it's not blind faith, I can assure you. It's what we call psychoneuroimmunology in action. Psychoneuroimmunology in action. Basically, positive emotional states, love, compassion, and forgiveness increase natural killer cell activity and your antibody production. Love literally strengthens your immunity. Isn't that amazing? Which is why you need to understand that if you've been judging yourself for being sick, you gotta pause. You don't have to spiritually bypass your symptoms. You just have to stop calling them a punishment. They're just communication. That's all it is, neutrality. Nothing has gone wrong. Your body is just simply saying, hey, I'm ready to release an old illusion of separation. So that's why in A Course in Miracles, there's this beautiful lesson. It's lesson number 356. And it says, sickness is but another name for sin. Healing is but another name for God. The miracle is thus a call to Him. And sin is not seen as the way it is seen in religion. In the Course in Miracles, and Christ actually shares with us in A Course in Miracles that sin is not real. We make mistakes, right? And ultimately, if you look at the root word of sin, it's actually the meaning is that you not accepting your holiness. That's a sin. You not accepting that you are the highest daughter of God. That's what sin was used for, not for what religion uses it for, to make us these inherent sinners that did this to Christ. I was like, I didn't do that. You all did that. Roman Empire, right? So sickness is but another name for sin. For it's just a mistake. It's just an illusion. It's just nothing has gone wrong. And healing is but another name for God when you are willing to bring it to God. Not, I'm setting an intention to heal. I'm bringing this to you, God. I'm willing to see things differently. The miracle is thus a call to Him. So, this is a process of salvation, which is the process of learning how to forgive, which is what the Course in Miracles teaches us, right? And ultimately, I'm going to tell you something that's very controversial. And one day I'm going to do a podcast episode on this. There's nothing to forgive. What you're doing really is releasing the victim mentality. Christ did not see himself as a victim. Christ was able to say on cross, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And so can you. That is why he said, you will go do bigger things than I will ever do. So when you follow this process, and that's what the course teaches us. That's what we teach inside of my community, the Sovereign Sister Sanctuary. That's where you return to coherence. When you choose love, you're calling on God, where you could have chosen hate, anger. But we can't do that without our nervous system that's not regulated, right? Because then we're very reactive. And then when you call on God, oh my God, the immune system follows that frequency of innocence. So I want you to just remind yourself that your body is not your enemy. It's a communication device. That's all it is. It's a communication device ultimately for love. Healing is another name for God, right? It's important to feel what happens and to understand that we are not our emotions. We don't heal by controlling outcomes or emotions. We heal by changing the meaning we give to them. And that's done through awareness and through a regulated nervous system. So you shift from my body's broken to my body is actually listening. And in that shift, that's when inflammation quiets. That's the heart brain synchronizing and the immune system returning to its original function. And it's not doing that to fight, it's basically doing that to witness the truth. That's all. So let's bring it all together. We've talked about so many juicy things. I want to integrate the science, the father line, the spiritual practice into one closing reflection and to help you really understand that this is where you're giving your body permission to heal, to complete the repair that generations never had time to finish. And together we've walked through this full circle, right? From the science of the immune system to the way generational trauma shapes its responses, to the father line that taught the body who protects and who directs, who basically taught us how to feel safe in our body or not, to the tools of Kundalini Yoga therapy and A Course in Miracles, Christ consciousness that reminds us that the body was never against us. So let's bring it all home. I want us to, in this moment, there's a lot that was learned, right? So if you can just take a deep inhale in through your nose, and we're going to exhale out through the mouth. Ah, even through that, right here, you're giving your immune system what it's been waiting for, a signal that the war is over. We just like to overcomplicate things. Notice your breath, notice your posture, notice the feelings and emotions that are moving through you, and know that they're there for a moment in time and space. They're not who you are. You are safe enough to repair. And even by doing those things of just taking a deep inhale and noticing and becoming aware, which we call introspection, and we build that through meditation and Kundalini Yoga therapy, that's what science calls down regulating the stress response, where the breath tells the vagus nerve to activate the parasympathetic system and immune function increases within minutes, like minutes. This is what generation actually healing looks like in real time. It's a daughter giving her lineage permission to rest. It's a daughter feeling these emotions that her ancestors could not, right? So ask yourself, especially with the immune system, where in my life am I still defending instead of allowing repair? And I want you to look at it just from the physical standpoint, although that's going to be easy to notice, right? I want you to look at it from an emotional, a spiritual perspective as well. Where do I feel like I still need to defend myself? And imagine what would change if I led my healing the way a healthy father leads, with clarity, with steadiness, with love, with alignment. Because those are the gifts that you receive from healing yourself, right? And as you ask yourself these questions, and as you chant Ramadasa this week, perhaps, it's so important to just let any image or memory arise. You're not doing it wrong or right. There's no such thing. And as this arises, then in your mind, you can hand it to the light of the infinite, of higher power, of God, of source. I'm aware, but I'm not that emotion. I'm not that feeling. I'm not that experience, because you don't need to fix it. You just got to stop rehearsing it, right? Your willingness to stop defending is what completes the cycle, not your intention, your willingness. And guess what? By you listening to this podcast episode, that's your willingness. God doesn't ask for a lot. We think we have to sacrifice and change ourselves, and God just wants you to be willing. That's it. So, to summarize, I want us to really understand from this podcast episode that our immune system does not need boosting. It needs truth. It needs meditation and mantra. It needs breath and prana. It needs direction. It needs your presence. And this is exactly what we do inside of the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, my online virtual community and movement of first-time generational cycle breakers like you that are healing themselves and 7 generations before and after you. And we work particularly not only on the father line, but also on the arc line through Kundalini Yoga therapy and, of course, Miracle Spiritual Psychotherapy. And we work through rewiring the nervous system and brain so that you can release the grief, the abuse patterns, and any of those patterns that have become very toxic in your lineage. So if you're interested in finding out more about the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, feel free to click on the link below. This is an incredible community that's going to help you rebuild trust in your body's intelligence, help you open up your psychic gifts, and help you heal 7 generations before and after you. And we do practice together, we study together, and we remind each other that repair is a team sport. Community is just as important as food and water, especially for someone who's healing generational trauma patterns. And so give yourself permission. If this episode resonated, that's your body saying it's time. So join us inside the sanctuary, link below, and let's finish what your ancestors could not. Not by fighting, but by remembering. So just take one last breath with me as we close out. Exhaling through the nose. And just remember, sister, your body is not attacking you. It's repairing you. And now it knows that you are listening. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your participation in our community, for your light, for your darkness, for being able to have the courage to bring these things to the altar and to be the cycle breaker for yourself and for your lineage. Of course, if this resonated, I would love for you to hit that like button, subscribe. We have new episodes coming out every single week. And also share this podcast episode with another sister that you know would absolutely benefit from it. This is a movement of healing 7 generations before and after us. And it is an honor to have you as part of our movement. And I will see you next week as we dive deeper into the next system and generational healing.